Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're going to be counting down my 5 favorite and my 5 least favorite album covers of 2017. Of course, in continuation of my year-end countdown lists that are going on currently. And if you want to check out some of the other lists that I've already done, there's going to be a link in the description down below that'll take you to the playlist on my channel with all my year-end list countdown as well as pretty much any list I've done on my channel before. So if you're curious to see the list I've already put out, you can check those out, as well as make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the future lists that I'll be putting out as this year-end list season, I guess, keeps going on. But today we're going to be talking about both the worst and the best album covers of 2017, at least in my own opinion. I just got to get that out of the way now. This is entirely my own opinion, what I say here in this video. If you happen to like some of the album covers that I dislike, that's perfectly okay. Or if you happen to dislike some of the album covers that I like, that's also perfectly fine. But really, it's just my own opinion based on album covers that I've seen this year. Now, unlike most of my other lists where I actually have to have heard the piece of music, whether it be the album or the song that I'm talking about, when it comes to these albums here that I'm talking about today, I don't necessarily have to have heard the album themselves. I just had to have seen the album cover. Because really the album cover is a bit separate from the album itself. And of course, it is debatable that they are connected in a way. Of course, I'm actually going to talk about that a bit later on when I get to some of my favorite albums of the year, our favorite album covers of the year. But in some cases, the album covers are just so bad that I don't even have to listen to the music piece itself to know that the album cover art is just bad in it by itself. And that's really going to be the case here for lots of the bad album covers I have to talk about here today. Though I have heard, I would say the good majority of the album covers I'm talking about here today. Some of them I haven't. But I'm just getting that out of the way right now. I didn't have to have reviewed or listened to the piece of music necessarily. I just needed to, see the album cover. And with that said, I think we're going to get started with my 5 worst album covers of the year first. Get the worst out of the way, then we can just move on to, better things. So let's get started with my number 5 pick. And for this video, instead of me just, talking to you guys like I typically do, I'm actually just going to display the album cover up here on screen while I'm talking about it, so you can just see what I'm talking about in case you haven't seen these album covers before or don't know what I'm referencing. I think it'll just work out a lot better. So, yeah, let's start with number 5 then. Alright, here we got Eminem's newest studio album, Revival. Of course, if you saw my review of this thing or any of some of the recent lists I put out for worst album, song of the year, I was not a fan of this thing at all. And the album cover, though I didn't really talk about it much in my actual review itself or in any of those list videos I was just mentioning, it's definitely not very good either. It's definitely still one of the stronger aspects of the album, I guess you could say, but, the fact that it's still here on this list, I think that just speaks for the album itself, really. This album cover is not very good at all. It's very corny, in my opinion. You have the whole American flag thing going on there, which, of course, is kind of, I guess, how the album is supposed to be a bit more political, I guess you could say. It's not to say that Eminem hasn't had political music in the past before, but there's definitely a few cuts on this new album where he's being, particularly political, especially concerning, modern American politics. I'm not going to go into that all too much, but yeah, of course. But really, the part about this album cover that's the worst, in my opinion, is just the Eminem himself, which is just kind of like face palming there in the background of this flag. It's just really corny, in my opinion. Seeing him do that, I mean, I understand that he's dissatisfied with politics and stuff, but to have him like face palming on the cover of the album with like the American flag, it's just really corny in my opinion. I feel like there were so many better, more creative ways you could have done this than this thing. This is almost laughable with how silly the concept just kind of is. But still not the worst album cover that I saw this year. Moving on to number 4 then, we have the newest album cover from Katy Perry for her newest album, Witness. This is one of the albums I actually did not listen to this year, or at least in its entirety. I did hear songs from this just played on the radio and stuff. But, I'm not a Katy Perry fan by any means. I typically don't really care about her. But, I did have the misfortune of seeing this album cover, and so here we are talking about it now. What exactly is going on here on this album cover? That's a question I've been asking myself for a good amount of time now, really ever since I saw this album cover. Though, primarily, we have, Katy Perry covering her eyes, I guess, and then she opens her mouth, and, a little Mike Wazowski eyeball is peeping out through her mouth. That's really all I get from this album cover. Yeah, just put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. That's all I'm really going to say about this album cover here. Moving on to my number 3 worst album cover of the year, we have the newest album cover from Chris Brown, Heartbreak on a Full Moon. Another album I definitely did not review this year because I am not a Chris Brown fan by any means, and especially not for this thing, which is like supposed to be 2.5 hours long. Does anyone out there like want to subject themselves to 2.5 hours of Chris Brown? Definitely not me. But I also had the misfortune of seeing this album cover, and you might be thinking to yourself, what's so bad about this album cover here? It's really just, how generic this thing looks. It literally just looks like you got like a picture of like a night sky background from like Google or something, and then like a generic like picture of the moon or something, and just colored it pink or red, and then you just took a generic picture of like a heart that you also got off Google Images or something, and just quickly edited them together to make this thing, because it's Heartbreak on a Full Moon, and there's a heart and a full moon on the album cover, so I guess it makes sense. Like I said, I didn't actually listen to this album, so I don't know how conceptual it is. It's probably not conceptual because it's Chris Brown, but it just seems like a really lazy album cover in my opinion. It looks like something I could have edited together. And I'm not like an editor for like graphics or anything like that. I think some of the stuff I do here for the channel should pretty much let you know that right off the bat, that I'm not exactly the greatest editor in the world when it comes to images or anything like that. But I could probably make something of this quality, which isn't all that great. Moving on to number 2, we have the newest album cover from Taylor Swift's newest album, Reputation. And Taylor Swift, another artist I'm not really a fan of. This isn't an album I listened to or reviewed. But I've never really cared for Taylor Swift all that much as a whole. I know some people hate her, I know some people love her, but I've always just not really cared. With the exception of a couple songs that just really annoy me that she's made. But for the most part, those are kind of excusable in my opinion, just because I just choose not to listen to them. On the other hand, this album cover, what exactly is going on here? It just looks like Taylor Swift is trying hard to look like tough or something like that. It really kind of falls flat on its face, just because I don't imagine her being that way in any capacity. Like, I'm not a fan of her music or anything, but like it just doesn't work in my opinion. Overall, it just comes off really forced to me because, like I said, maybe the music on this album reflects this album cover well, but even if that's the case, this album cover is still really laughable in my opinion. And it doesn't really help that this thing was just plastered onto the side of multiple UPS trucks, especially, every day, walking to school and stuff. I just see these UPS trucks driving around with this album cover on the side, and it's hilarious, honestly. Just to see this thing on the side of a UPS truck. I feel bad for the drivers just because this thing is so laughable. It might actually be a danger to other drivers, just how distracting and funny it is, just because of how ridiculous it looks. They easily could have put a much better album cover on the side of UPS trucks, but I guess that just didn't happen. I guess they got stuck with this one because Taylor Swift probably has the money to do this. But yeah, the fact that I saw this thing just everywhere on the side of UPS trucks and stuff just solidified this album cover in my mind as being one of the worst of the year in my opinion. But it still has nothing on my number 1 pick, which happens to be the new album cover from the newest album from Maroon 5, Red Pill Blues. This is an album I actually reviewed here on the channel, and of course if you saw some of my recent list of worst album, worst song of the year, you know once again, I did not like this album really at all. And for an album that I really did not like, the album cover I also really do not like. Just really because this thing it really embodies everything I hate about modern Maroon 5. For the record, I am a fan of the band's older material, but as time has gone on, I really have grown not to like their newer stuff at all, really. Just check out my review for this album if you want to see what I mean in more detail. But yeah, this album cover really embodies what I hate about this band in 2017, and just this more modern era of the band, I would have to say. For one thing, it's an incredibly lazy album cover. You just have like a really plain background with pictures of all the band members. By the way, this album cover reminds you that there are 7 people in Maroon 5. It takes 7 people to make a Maroon 5 album. Probably more, because there's probably other like writers and producers and stuff. But it's for an album that sounds like it's made by like 1 or 2 people, with how just bland and uninteresting it is in terms of how much is going on. The fact that they're actively putting out there that there's 7 people involved in the creation of this project is kind of a bad idea in my opinion. But that's more of a nitpick than anything else, because the real problem with this thing just once again has to go back to the fact that it's such a basic album cover. You just have the pictures of the band members with these like Instagram or Snapchat filters over them. I can't really tell because I don't use Instagram or Snapchat, but it's something like that. instantly dating this album cover because, how are people going to look back on this in, 10, 20, 50 years, if they are at all, which I doubt, but let's say someone is, by chance. What are they going to think about this other than just a laugh? Because, by that point in time, chances are these, things like Instagram, Snapchat, they're probably not going to be relevant anymore. They'll probably be replaced by something else, and they'll be seen as a thing of the past. Kind of like how, MySpace is kind of seen as a thing of the past now. And, any sort of, MySpace related stuff relating to bands from that era is kind of laughed at nowadays. I feel like this is going to fall into that same category years from now just because it has that aspect to it. It's just very much, it's very much about the now. Like, it's very apparent that the band is trying to appeal to younger audiences, who use these apps and, things of that sort, trying to get their money because, when they see this album cover with these, filters on them and stuff, they'll be like, I use that app with those filters, and they do too. They must be cool, so I'll buy the album. I guess that's the logic that they're going for here with this thing. But, it's not going to age well. Like, this is only going to work for so long while these things are relevant. And once again, it just really backs up my idea that Maroon 5 are really just in it for the money nowadays. Just trying to make as much money right now off this album as possible, not really caring about whether or not this album has any longevity to it, whether or not people are going to care about it in 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now. And of course now I'm getting into the actual music itself, but really this album cover, as I mentioned before, sometimes when the music reflects the album cover, it could be a great thing for, taking that music itself and expressing it into another medium. But here, this album does that, but for all the wrong reasons. Like, this album cover perfectly captures the album itself, yet when the album itself is trash, that's not really a good thing for the album cover. So yeah, this thing right here, I mean, just looking at it, I know some people might not think it's the most offensive looking album cover or things of that sort. Definitely not, the worst album cover of all time or anything like that. But still, it's just for what it represents, I detest it, honestly. Yeah. And with that said, guys, those are the worst album covers of 2017, in my own opinion. If you like any of those album covers, that's perfectly fine. And like I said, if you like any of those albums themselves, and listen to all of them, like I said, but, that's also perfectly fine. And, with all that bad stuff out of the way, we've now done worst album covers of the year, worst songs, worst albums. Now it's time to get into, the good stuff. And let's begin, with my favorite album covers of the year while we're talking album covers. So, yeah, I mean, the same rules apply for worst album covers. Let's get right into it, I guess. Alright, at number 5 on my favorite album covers of the year list, we have the newest album from Creeper to Eternity in Your Arms. Aside from just enjoying this album in general during this year, I really like the album cover that goes along with it. I like the purple coloring. I think purple is, probably one of my favorite colors. Blue is definitely my favorite color overall, but purple's also pretty far up there. I like the color, especially when it's used in like album covers and things like that, just because I don't always feel like it gets a lot of representation. So seeing it here is pretty cool. I like the band's logo on this album cover. I like the kind of figure that we have here, kind of looking out into this sort of gothic environment, I guess you could say, this sort of city place, which I think looks pretty cool. It just really kind of captures the feel of the album as well. And that's going to be a recurring thing with some of my favorite album covers of the year, how they really kind of capture the feel of the album themselves. In a good way, that is. Unlike the Maroon 5 album cover I mentioned before. That was for all the wrong reasons, like I said. But this one does it really well. It captures the feel of the album itself, which, of course, like I said, I like the album, so it works very well. I like this thing. I like the colors going on here. I like the actual drawing itself. Just everything about it works really well, in my opinion. Moving on to number 4 now. We have the newest, or not the newest, technically, but the cover to Brockhampton Saturation 2, the second of 3 albums they released this year, making it not the newest, but, the second newest, but it is still relatively new. Now, this one, might surprise some people, given that, especially compared to the last pick I had and a lot of the other picks I'm going to be showing you here today, this one definitely goes for a very different feel to it, because it's not very, I guess, artsy and, fancy or just well-painted or something like that. It's a lot more simplistic, it's photographed, but I do really like it as well. And it has a sort of fun quality to it. Just look at Amir there on the album cover. He looks like he's having a great time driving that car around. Maybe they should have put this album cover on the side of UPS trucks instead. That would have been really funny, in my opinion, instead of the Taylor Swift album. And yeah, there's not really much else I have to say about this one. I love the color scheme for this album cover, as well as the other Saturation albums. I know they have pretty much the same color scheme to them, the blue and the white. I really like that. I love the kind of simplicity of it. It's definitely different from the other picks I have here. It's memeable. It's fun in my opinion, and that's good enough, at least in my own opinion, to make my list here. Moving on to number 3, then we have the newest EP from Mastodon, Cold Dark Place. I debated whether or not I wanted to put this here or their newest studio album, Emperor of Sand, that was also released this year. But I decided to go with Cold Dark Place just because I like the album cover a bit more. I like how kind of, dark and still very detailed that this album cover is. For just being a 4-track EP of, leftover songs, they really went above and beyond with this album cover here. Just how detailed it is, like how you have the sort of tree and all the branches and how detailed it is. You could just stare at this thing and find new things every time you're looking at it, and that's something I really like about album covers, when you can just keep looking at them and find something new every time. And I love how it goes perfectly with the feel of this EP. Despite being leftover tracks, this EP has a definite sort of sad, depressed, kind of melancholy mood to it. And this kind of reflects it with how dark this album cover is, just in terms of the colors. It's very black and dark blue. It goes perfectly with that, as opposed to some of their other album covers that have a more vibrant feel to them. This one is definitely a bit more depressing and just, not as, in your face in terms of how much color is going on with, say an album cover like their album cover for Once More Around the Sun. But this one is still just as detailed as their previous album covers. It just also takes a more subdued approach to it in terms of its color scheme, which is something I really like. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the newest album from Elder, Reflections of a Floating World. I also just really love the colors here in this album cover. I love the sort of greenish blue turquoise color that's going on here, and this image that you have here. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It looks like this ocean, like with rocks or mountains. I can't really tell exactly. And there's waves kind of like crashing upon them. It's just a really beautiful image in my opinion. I could stare at this thing for hours with how beautiful it looks, especially with the piece of music itself that goes along with it, the album itself. It works really well in my opinion, and especially for a doom metal album. Doom metal, a genre that's more known for being, depressing, slower, just, as you could probably guess. This definitely has more of a, not an upbeat feel, but a more vibrant color scheme to it. You have, like I said, this sort of brightish green color. It looks like there's a bit of yellow in that wave that's kind of crashing, maybe because of like sunlight or something like that. It's definitely a more bright, vibrant album cover, and I really love the colors going on here. Like I said before, I love this image. It kind of reminds me just like of waves in the ocean, or like some like prehistoric Earth where there's just like a massive ocean and just like continents forming or something. I know I'm getting really abstract with this, but I just really love it. And in the top part where it has the title of the band and the album cover, you have this sort of like, I guess, that shape up there. The name of the shape is slipping me right now. It's like I completely forgot the name of that shape now. Kind of embarrassing, but I'll recover, I guess. Whatever that thing is up there, it looks really cool in my opinion. It's just an awesome album cover in my opinion. And it goes along with one of my favorite albums of the year as well. But of course, if you want to find out where that ranks in my favorite albums of the year, you're gonna have to wait until my favorite albums of the year list comes out, which should be soon, by the way. All right, and moving on to number 1 now, my favorite album cover of the year belongs to Lord's Melodrama. Now, this album cover, typically, I feel like metal albums tend to have some of the best album covers when it comes, to all the genres of music. If you couldn't tell, 2 that made my best list were metal albums. So the fact that we have a pop album here at number 1 is a bit surprising, but I feel like this album cover, gets the same things right as a lot of those metal albums I like do, especially some of the ones I was talking about here on this list already. In terms of the color scheme and just the overall feel of this album cover, it goes perfectly with the album itself and the mood that the album kind of gives off. The album itself, not to get into too much detail about the music, is definitely a very sad album. It's a breakup album, so it's very depressing, very sad. And the colors here on this album cover just go along perfectly with it. The dark blues, the black coloring. It's just very sad looking, and it perfectly captures the kind of sad feel that the album gives off. And the image itself, it just perfectly goes together with the music itself, in my opinion. And if I was to pick a single album that had like the perfect album cover attached to it for what the music content was, I feel like this would definitely win out, in my opinion, at least for 2017. Just because it so perfectly kind of displays what the music itself on the album is about. It has a sort of depressed, sad, kind of want to stay in bed all day kind of feel to it that just works really well. The image itself is just beautiful. It's definitely my favorite album cover of the year, and I just really like it. Yeah, so those were my top 5 favorite album covers of 2017. Now that we've gotten, the worst of 2017 stuff out of the way, we got to keep moving on into the best stuff, because coming up soon, I'm going to have my favorite songs of the year, favorite albums of the year, albums I anticipate for 2018. It's all going to be tons of fun, folks. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that content when it drops. Once again, check out that link I have in the description down below. That'll take you to the playlist with all the year-end lists I've already done, as well as all the other lists I've done on my channel just in the past. Comment down below what were some of your favorite album covers of the year, or some of your least favorite album covers of the year. How do you think mine are in comparison to those? Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.